Anyway, thank you everyone. Thanks for those that have stayed off. I see a few dropped off. Eric, you mentioned how important the internet is. If you're not online, you're not in business. So it's a good lead into this next panel. And it's a bit of a move away from home ownership and more towards the opportunity to build more home ownership in rural California. I think with the lack of broadband or lack of the internet, you see a lot less likely for people to even want to move there, and therefore a lot less building going on, a lot less home ownership going on. So these next two panels kind of focus on the rural impacts of the lack of internet and also the lack of insurability of homes out there due to wildfires, and Michael will talk about the advanced technology around what he's focusing on with regards to helping prevent wildfires with technology. So the Rural County Representatives of California is making a very positive run towards broadband infrastructure. And for those that don't know, the Rural County Representatives of California actually is an affiliate of Golden State Finance Authority, and formed Golden State Finance Authority back in '93. RCRC has been around since 1972, and the board is made up of elected supervisors from 37 of its member counties. So with that, Barbara is the Chief Economic Development Officer for RCRC, and she oversees the implementation of the organization's economic development activities, specifically focusing on forest resiliency, rural broadband, and infrastructure development. Barbara's worked in the area of economic development for over 30 years. Previously, she was president and CEO of the Sacramento Area Commerce and Trade Organization at SACTO. And prior to SACTO, she was state director of the California Small Business Development Center program. Thank you, Barbara. I'll turn it to you.
Sure. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, everyone, for engaging in this conversation today. As Craig mentioned, broadband, if you're not online, you're not in business, was the quote from the session just before this one. And we want to echo the importance of broadband. So that said, I want to share my screen with you for just a few minutes. So as Craig mentioned, just a few seconds about RCRC. So RCRC, Rural County Representatives of California, was started in the early 70s, primarily as a legislative and regulatory lobbying arm for a group of rural counties across the state. Today, RCRC represents 37 of California's 58 counties, not only from a lobbying and advocacy point of view, but since the early 70s, we've added a very robust and important business development arm to the organization. As Craig mentioned, that is Golden State Finance Authority. And 3 years ago, the organization added an economic development arm to the organization. And again, just to reiterate what Craig said, that economic development efforts are really focused in three, what I call industry-specific areas, that around forest resiliency, reducing the risk of catastrophic wildfire, infrastructure, and we're just standing up that effort. Actually, in the last couple of months, we've really leaned into that. And then rural broadband, which is what I wanted to just touch briefly on with you all today. So why would RCRC get involved in rural broadband? Here are some storylines on the slide here. You saw how big the area is that RCRC covers. It's larger than 23 states, and within that area, nearly 51%, or a little over 51% of the residents and businesses in that area lack access to high-speed internet. It's no longer, stating the obvious, it's no longer a luxury item, and perhaps that came into sharp focus with the development of COVID a little over a year and a half ago. COVID really illuminated the chasm that exists between those that have access to internet and those that do not. and we saw it quite clearly across our rural county members. So not only as we all retreated to our homes for school and work, but more and more over these past few years, internet has become a link to how we manage our finances, how people in rural California access specialized healthcare or not if they don't have it. So it's a real, it really is no longer a luxury item. It is a necessity. It's a part of our life that's here to stay. Public health and safety is an important part of it when you're talking about rural California. You know, we have, as I mentioned earlier, we do have the risk of catastrophic wildfires across our area, and we've all seen in the news the failure of 911 outreach calls to alert residents and businesses of the approaching fire event. So we need a better system around public safety. This goes everything from, you know, putting cameras on roads in rural California to monitor driving and safety, accidents, snowfall, air quality, or first alert for fire. And then an element of our work that's near and dear to my heart is the economic development aspect of it. Broadband is an absolute asset to economic development. And I think we can all agree how this ties in to this group at a single family symposium is people who have jobs buy homes. So to have the ability for communities to attract companies into their region, create economic development, create jobs and investment is at the core of home ownership. So how did RCRC get involved? So we've been involved, that said, we've been involved historically for decades. We had a very robust and still do legislative and regulatory effort. It was largely in defensive posture, trying to hang on to what rural governments, rural residents, rural businesses could get as far as broadband. And it got chipped away a little bit more and more each year. So it was largely defensive posture. In January of 2020, again, with the advent of the Economic Development Unit coming online and really melding together the terrific talents that exist within this organization across our government affairs unit, across our business development unit, and then our economic development unit, we really focused on what we could proactively do to move the needle and to deliver broadband to rural California. And I'll just go ahead and say that this is, what I'm about to say is in no way negative toward the incumbent service providers, the big names that we all know. It's just their business model that wasn't set up to serve rural California. They report to shareholders and look for high return, and that's not always found in rural California. So we looked at different models across the United States, ways that we could deliver or have delivered broadband to all the reaches of our region. And as I mentioned, we brought in our business development unit with their expertise in financing to look at new financial models as well. We really aligned our government affairs unit with the work that we found and uncovered in the new models and new financial models. And really over the course of the last 18 months, again, with COVID, the wind beneath our wings, so to speak, we have developed a program of work under which RCRC is stepping into the broadband development arena. So this whole effort is focused on 4 key priorities that we identified right out of the chute. We're going to focus on getting fiber to the address. Fiber first is our mantra, with the understanding that fiber will not be the available delivery mechanism for all corners of our 37 member counties, but we really are focusing on fiber. Under capacity, this goes in 2 areas. One, as far as the utilization of the most future-proof technologies in our delivery of service, and also to speed. So right now, and I won't get into the details of it, but right now the threshold for speed delivery is so low. across rural California. And we want to start the conversation at gig speed capacity. And I'll give you by way of example, I have a colleague here in our government affairs unit who lives in a rural part of one of our counties. And there are 3 members of her household, herself, her spouse, and her high school age daughter. They have to have 3 providers coming into their house. So they're paying 3 service providers to deliver broadband to their house, 1 for each of them, because none of the providers individually have strong enough levels of service delivery to allow for more than 1 person on a Zoom call or in a Zoom classroom. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about capacity. Broadband for all quite simply means not only to the farmhouse, but to the farm, not only to the business park, but to Main Street. Again, as Mr. Frazier said earlier, if you're not online, you're not in business. So we want to make sure that everybody has access to high-speed broadband. And the 4th of our key priorities is perhaps the most important, is we're going to look for partners and leverage existing resources as we go forward. We don't feel the need at all to be the solution. California is a big state. This is a big problem, and it's going to require many players and many solutions. All of that being said, those are our key priorities, and our board approved a program of work that goes across these 3 levels, everything from foundational readiness, arming our counties with broadband strategic plans so they can know where broadband exists in their counties, where it doesn't, what's needed, all the way through bringing in information about new models, new financial tools, new ways of delivering broadband from players outside of California, as well as within California, those that are doing unique things and have innovative approaches. And then perhaps the third, level 3 there, is the most heady of what we're taking on, but we are stepping into, as I mentioned, the broadband deployment game and introducing a new model of service delivery. Again, this is additive. It's not meant to knock any of the providers out of the way, but it introduces a new model. So the model that we're looking at is one of open access, public benefit, municipal broadband. So if you think of open access municipal broadband as you would think of an airport, a county builds an airport, the airlines pay a fee to utilize that airport, and we as travelers pay a fee to get on the flight and go to our destination. The same model is what will be mimicked here with an open access public benefit municipal broadband model. So we will invest in building fiber to the address, and then we will invite providers, existing providers, onto that fiber network to deliver service to the customer. So what happens is you get the creation of competition. There's all of a sudden choice for rural California as to who their provider is. So that colleague of ours that I mentioned that has 3 providers paying for 3 levels of service, if they have fiber delivery and they have a choice of 8 to 12 providers, they can pick their package that works for them, their speed, and sign up, and they are good to go. So we like the open access model for those reasons. Public benefit, we intend to use our fiber to the address system to overlay public service delivery. So by way of that, in the state of Utah through Utopia Fiber, which is the largest open access public benefit system in the US at present, they have an early fire detection monitoring system that overlays their open access system. They also have air monitoring for air quality that's built into their system. Things like public Wi-Fi in downtown areas or parks, we'd like to build that in as well. And the municipal broadband is because we are a governmental entity that will be taking this task on. And I mention that because the big service providers are shareholder driven. Municipal broadband Our mission is to deliver broadband to the residents and businesses, to the constituents of the areas that we serve. So our mission is a little bit different than incumbent service providers. So I won't go into a lot of detail, but just the takeaway from this slide is that with RCRC undertaking this program of work and our board approving it, we had, again, wind beneath our wings a little bit at the end of session in June, early July, with the passage and the governor signing on July 20th of SB 156 that really created an historic investment in broadband in California. So in the budget, the governor allocated $6 billion with a B dollars to broadband deployment, focused primarily or first and foremost to unserved and underserved areas of the state of California. Unless we think that this is just a rural issue of being looked over, there are 115,000 addresses in San Francisco that do not have access to high-speed internet either. So this is a problem that exists across the state of California. RCRC is focused on solving that problem in rural areas with the help of, with some of the component pieces of SB 156 that was passed. So that brings us to, why is broadband important to this group? And why are we talking about it today? And I think the reason are highlighted there in red. This is the same slide that I showed you earlier, but you know, if you are a real estate agent, if you are a lender, if you are a real estate developer, a residential real estate developer, broadband is going to be an important component of the homes that you sell or build or have in mind. So it's something to keep top of mind for the reasons mentioned here and developed early and talked about earlier. So what can you do? Carolyn told me to ask you this question, y'all. So I'm not looking for another job for everybody, but I would encourage you to stay in touch. And you can do so via goldenstateconnect.org, which is the website that we have under which all of our broadband related work as we undertake this ambitious program of work. There'll be updates on that website. All of the work will fall under this new organization that we're creating called Golden State Connect. You'll find some of the information there that I've mentioned in the bullets already resting on that website. And as we start our work toward deploying broadband, I'm sure that we will have regular progress updates through that website. And then the other thing I would just offer is, if any of you whose reach might be greater than ours at RCRC have seen or experienced unique models for broadband deployment in your course of work, we are open to and invite all new ways of looking at things. So we invite your wisdom as we move through this, as I said, ambitious program of work.
Thank you, Barbara. There's one quick question. Are the resources in SB 156 state generated or federal? I'll let you answer that.
That's a good question. So of the $6 billion, $1 billion, and it's the billion that is going toward the last mile that was delineated there on my slide, is state general fund. The remaining $5 billion are dollars that have come to the state of California via the American Rescue Plan Act. So the interesting thing about the rescue plan dollar, or noteworthy thing, is that those dollars have to be spent within a 5-year period. So they have to be allocated and encumbered in state speak by the end of 2026.
Well, thank you again. And, you know, we can't emphasize enough how important that is, and, you know, how it raised to the awareness of everybody from the fed to the state level. And it was really COVID that brought this awareness, and those left behind, especially in rural areas and the school kids and what have you. It was just obviously not a good reason to have to, you know, focus on broadband, but it was helpful. The next panel, Michael Day, he's going to discuss closed loop pump storage and how this works to help prevent wildfires on the the power shutoffs. Michael is the Advanced Energy Program Development Team Lead for Trane Technologies. He's responsible for leading development and deployment of microgrids and virtual power plants for Trane customers. He's got more than 25 years of sales and construction experience in the energy storage and distributed energy resource sectors. Mr. Day graduated from the Naval Nuclear Power School. I won't tell what year, Michael, so we don't need to call you out on your age. And Michael also holds multiple patents in the energy storage assets. So please, Michael, go ahead.
I appreciate it, Craig, and thank you for having us here today. You start out and you say, well, what does this have to do with housing? I think it'll become apparent. Hopefully it will. So what we're going to do today is to go through flashes, fire main linked auxiliary supply, hydraulic energy storage, and closed loop in general. Talk about the economic benefits and really tie this back to what it means for housing. And it's a pretty interesting concept. So pump storage hydropower and open versus closed loop. So pump storage is something that a lot of people are probably aware of, even though they might not know it. So in California, pump storage is by far the largest form of electric energy storage in the United States. That's about a 95% market share. And that's because it can be really big and extremely cost effective. So pump storage, most people think of it like Thermalito Afterbay and Lake Oroville. So they drain part of Lake Oroville out, then they fill it back up. If you've ever driven up Highway 80 to Reno, you see an exit for Drum Forebay and Drum Afterbay. Those are pump storage. But most of the, and pump storage is great. It has a very long life expectancy. It's the reason why it dominates that market space. But most of that pump storage is what's called an open loop. So what they do is they dam a valley, they dam a river, and they dam it in one spot, and then they dam it a few miles later at a lower elevation. And they'll pump some of the water up during the day or when prices are low, and then they let the water run down through the turbine when prices are high. SMUD has a lot of this in the Sierras. And it's a great concept. It's very inexpensive to build it, but it has some problems. You're damming a river valley and flooding it, and the environmental impacts there are pretty extreme. You have a limited number of places that you can put this. So altogether, we haven't built a lot of new in what's called open loop, where it's in the course of that water course. We haven't built a lot of that, and it's unlikely that we're going to be building a lot of that in the future. Closed loop is different, though. It doesn't mean damming a creek bed or a river to create a reservoir. Instead, you put a reservoir on top of a hill or down in a field, and then they're connected by a pipeline. And when prices are low, the water gets pulled out of the lower reservoir and pumped to the upper reservoir. And when prices are high, the water runs down and turns the electric turbine and makes electricity. But because it's not in the stream bed, it has a lot lower environmental impact because you're not flooding these really sensitive areas. What Flashes does is it takes that and it says, well, can we make this a modular and really widely deployable type of situation? And so you put PV panels down in a rural community, you pump the water up to the top of a hill, a mile or two away, and then the water flows down the hill, turns a turbine, and goes out to the electric grid. So what you end up with is a combination of power resilience, wildfire resilience, and new revenue typically for other uses. So this is for a project for the County of Lake that we're currently developing in North Lakeport. We have another one also in Lake County for the Hidden Valley Lake Community Services District, and we're working with other counties that are interested in doing the same thing. So the Flashes version of closed loop is fire main linked auxiliary supply hydraulic energy storage, because everything has to have a name, right? Where we differ from it is that we use tanks instead of reservoirs. So instead of having a lake or an impoundment, we put in water tanks. So it's a higher first cost, but it largely eliminates evaporation. It eliminates most of the water quality issues, and it really reduces the footprint that these have. We co-locate renewables. So instead of this closed loop system relying on the grid to charge it, we would put in photovoltaic or geothermal in the location to be the power source. And it increases the value of the plant, and it also makes it much better at being the heart of a microgrid where it can keep the lights on for an extended period of time. And that's another one of the uses, is a microgrid. So with public safety power shutoffs, turning the electricity and communications off for broad swaths of California, the ability to keep the lights on locally is a real benefit to these local communities. And then finally, it's a firefighting capability. So it would be tied into the local fire mains in an emergency. It provides mass flow and gravity feed pressure to it. We actually, on the pipeline coming down from the upper tanks to the lower tanks, we put in hydrants out in the boondocks where the pipeline is running. So every 800 feet, there's a water supply where previously there was none. We're talking about helicopter dip tanks for CAL Fire helicopters. We're talking about a toll booth where water tanker trucks can roll under, and you have 3 of them in a row, and they can roll in side by side and get filled up. So a tremendous increase in firefighting capability. And so it can provide, a typical system can provide 100,000 gallons of water per minute for over 6 hours. So just to give you an idea of how much that is, this is a 15-foot wide by 30-foot long swimming pool with a 9-foot deep end. So it's about a 15,000 gallon water swimming pool. 35 million gallons is one of these swimming pools every 10 seconds for 6 hours coming out of the fire hydrants. So for communities where there's an issue, where the fire hydrants can go dry and the town can burn down, this is a really significant issue. So, you know, people talk about energy storage all the time. What about batteries? Well, fires risk, materials, expected useful life, the power quality that comes out, the amount of local jobs that are produced, the cost, all of the things having to do with this, with pump storage, are much, much lower and much more beneficial compared to electric batteries. And if you compare closed loop pumped hydro to traditional pumped hydro, it has a lot of benefits in terms of being able to be more easily permitted. So if this is so great, why is it not being done everywhere? Well, the answer is in this chart. So if you have an asset, an electrical system asset that you're selling to the grid, then what you get is you get paid on several different aspects. You get paid for capacity, energy, renewable energy credits, and ancillary services. And that's this stack of revenue. And against that, you have operating and maintenance costs, debt service, and then a profit or return to an investor, because these are structured as public-private partnerships. So the money does not come from the local government. The money comes from investors that want to build these, take the tax equity benefits from it, and sell the electricity onto the grid for the next 4 decades. And that's a really good investment if they can get access to all of the market revenue that something like this should be able to access. The problem is that the most valuable one of those pieces of that is the capacity attribute. And the capacity attribute is roughly 80% of all the profit margin. It's the largest single attribute. It's typically on the order of about 35 to 45% of all the revenue generated by an asset of this type. And because of some issues at the California Independent System Operator, there's a logjam there. You can only apply to sell capacity during a 2-week window once a year. and they're not even opening that window until 2023, and they're expecting 5 to 7 years of review time. So effectively, for a community that's looking to put these in, the ability to sell capacity is kind of gone right now. So what that means is that these projects are dependent upon state or federal grants to buy down the first cost of the project. But in return, there are a tremendous amount of benefits that accrue to local communities. So one of the benefits that accrues to local communities if these systems get installed is fire flow. So for example, at Hidden Valley Lake CSD, which is in rural Lake County, there's a development that Kimco has been trying to develop for a while called Valley Oaks. And Valley Oaks is looking to put in, I think it's 750 single family dwellings in southeast Lake County. So it is an economically disadvantaged community, and these are going to be relatively low cost by California standards. The problem is the existing water system at Hidden Valley Lake, while it would be able to provide the potable water that's needed, the water that's needed for the sink and washing the dishes and drinking water and everything else, they can't provide the needed fire flow. So the project can't get started. Well, with this system, we could have a parallel system of water mains to feed the fire hydrants. And that would allow the Valley Oaks project to move forward. And that's an extra 500 to 750 houses. The next thing is property value. Property values in rural California have just gotten hammered because of the wildfire threat, and for good reason. I mean, the insurance companies use actuaries, and it's a science where they're taking a look and saying, okay, you're in a high fire threat district, you have a limited ability, your community has a limited ability to fight this. They have to look out for their shareholders or the other people who are getting insurance through that company, and it's rated appropriately. Well, guess what? If you've got a tank with 35 billion gallons of water on top of the hill next to the town, your chances of burning down have gone down a lot, and that has an impact on property values. Another part of that is reducing PSPS de-energization. So with these systems, when the lights go out in most of the county, and the lights would go out locally, instead these systems are set up to carry the grid under a microgrid, and they can keep the lights on. So in Hidden Valley Lake, we've been talking with PG&E, out of 10 previous PSPS events for that community, 9 of them were due to electricity being interrupted somewhere else. So we would have been able to keep the lights on in that community 9 times out of 10. Well, reducing PSPS events, the number of de-energizations, has an absolute value on property. So that's a value for the people who are in the homes right now. That's a benefit for the lenders that are loaning to homes, because they don't like seeing, nobody would like to see the value of that asset decreasing. And it also has something to do with people who are trying to get into it, particularly first-time buyers who are looking to see something appreciate in value. Fire insurance is another big one. It's become very difficult in many rural communities to get fire insurance at all outside of the state plan. And while we haven't built one yet to tell you exactly how much it is, we've talked to insurance companies, and absolutely they would be able to take this local mitigation into account when they're trying to underwrite in different areas. So reducing the fire threat is the key to both increase competition and reduce rates. And if somebody can pay a mortgage, but sorry, your fire insurance is $600 a month, which it absolutely can be, that's a big impact on the ability of families to get into a home. It's no cost to local government. So the way that these are developed is under what's called energy services performance contracting on the procurement side, and they're built under public-private partnerships. So for the projects that we're doing, the local governments are choosing a partner, an energy partner to work with. The energy partner does the development work, takes the risk if the project doesn't come to fruition. And if it does come to fruition, then you have private investors paying for the installation. And incidentally, most of the time, the local governments who are giving up some land in order to get this asset put into their communities are actually getting a new revenue stream out of it. It can be targeted. We tend to target our work on economically disadvantaged communities or severely economically disadvantaged communities. And there are a lot of places out there where these can go. So it makes sense to try and target them at communities that are already facing problems. And lastly, it's widely replicable. California needs 11,000 to 12,000 megawatts of peaking capacity in place within the next 9 years. So what are we going to do? Are we going to build some giant power plants in Utah and count on the wires to bring it here? Or can we do hundreds of little projects like these that are absolutely price competitive? So it's not driving up the electric rates. It's just taking the money we already spend on the procurement portion of electricity and directing it towards something that has local benefits in terms of keeping the lights on during PSPS events and keeping water in the fire hydrants during occasional big fires. And again, there are plenty of communities in California that are low and moderate income. They're in fire country and they have hills next to them. So the Lake County timeline on this, we made it an application about a week ago to the Build Back Better program. We're working on getting on some other grants to do that buy down. We're expecting the grants to probably be in place by next summer, and then we would move to the final development agreement roughly a year from now, and then the plans would be complete in 2023, and construction would take about a year to a year and a half to get it done.
There's one question, actually now there's two. The first one, so do you need hills? Do you need a water source? So two questions in one.
So yes, you need a hill. You can deal with hills of different heights. The higher the hill, the easier it is to make it work economically, because the higher the hill, the more energy you're storing. So your pipes can be smaller, your tanks can be smaller, and that relates to a reduction in cost. But yeah, you need a hill. And with regards to the water, these will almost always be with groundwater. And the reason is that if you're taking surface water, even reclaimed water from a wastewater treatment plant, that falls under the tender mercies of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, the navigable surface waters of the United States, the Clean Water Act. The permitting process to go through the Corps of Engineers on something like this is on the order of 5 to 6 years. But if you're using groundwater for the initial recharge on it, you're not falling under those same review processes. And again, these are tanks with a lid on them. So once you fill it up, the water should stay in there unless you're using it to fight a fire or something emergency comes up. You shouldn't really have to top them up. There's actually a little bit of evaporation that happens as the tanks refill and empty every day, but it's on the order of like 100 gallons out of 35 million. So yeah, it might take 4, 5, 6 months in some cases to fill them up initially, but after that, the water is staying inside the tanks and doesn't need to be refilled. It just shuttles back and forth. Thank you for that.
There's two questions. The first one, does the community get the power?
Great question. Normally, no. Normally what happens is the investor that's put in the PV and the turbines and the tanks and the pipelines, the electricity gets generated by the sun, they're storing it and they're selling it onto the grid under a long-term contract. That's what's paying for, giving them a payback on their $50 million investment, $60 million investment to put these in. However, in an emergency when the lights are going to go dark, what we're doing is we're working with PG&E so that PG&E can reconfigure the grid, and when the lights would have otherwise gone out, they can keep the lights on in that community, typically for a fairly extended period of time. These are roughly 90 megawatt hour storage and 70 to 80 megawatt hours of generation per day during the summer, which is when you really worry about it. So that's the ability to carry a small town for a pretty considerable period of time. So in that case, when the lights would have otherwise been out, those communities will be getting their electricity from this local hydropower asset, but they'll still be getting their bill from PG&E or whoever their local load serving entity is.
And then a double question: how much percent lost power from the PV to the new generation? And it's actually a three-part question. What will the Lake County project cost? And then, is it always potable water for these?
So the first question was on your losses. So round trip efficiency on pump storage is about 90%. That's the traditional. We think that this might be a little bit lower, in the 85% range. But one of the things that we do a little bit differently at Trane is that we don't convert the photovoltaic DC energy into alternating current with an inverter. We're actually able to run the pumps directly off the direct current. And so that saves some of the losses that would normally be there. So these compare very favorably with electrochemical batteries on a single day round trip efficiency. Where they really shine, though, is in how long they last. There's a great quote that came from, there's a turbine manufacturer out of Britain, and we were on a call with some engineers. And when the engineer said, well, what's the expected useful life of the turbine? And this guy, Darren Wager, said, well, we only started installing alternating current hydro turbines in the late 1880s and early 1890s, and a lot of them are still around. So it's really too soon to tell. So you're talking about something that can be used every day for decades. Water tanks and water pipelines and turbines can last, very, very long periods of time. And so one of the parts that's nice about it is that from an efficiency standpoint, instead of the efficiency degrading pretty quickly as you use the asset, which is pretty much typical with most chemistries of electrochemical batteries, with a mechanical and gravity energy storage, your efficiency is what it is at the start, and it stays there for decades into the future. So that was the first question. What's the cost of the project? For a 20 megawatt, 90 megawatt hour system, it's on the order of about $60 million, and that includes generation and energy storage. That's about where we see the prices. With material inflation, that could go up. We're still relatively early in the process, but we've done a fair amount of engineering and brought in partners. We feel pretty comfortable around those prices. And then, Craig, what was the third one?
The question is it always potable water for these?
So this is raw water coming. It's groundwater. It'll be treated. It's not always going to be potable, but it's almost always going to be groundwater, just because of the licensing the restrictions that happen. If you try to use surface water, you just get into all kinds of regulatory requirements that you just don't want to deal with. So it's going to be groundwater. It will be hypochlorinated, but it won't be treated to potable water standards, primarily because of the freshness requirements and water turnover requirements that there are for potable water. So, in the event that you needed to use this to keep the fire mains filled up with water, it's very much a, in case of emergency, break glass kind of situation. It would not be good for those water pipes. They'd have to flush them out. They'd have to sterilize them, but you got to have a town left to worry about that. So if the option is that you have a wall of fire coming that could burn down your town, which is a real possibility for some of these communities, and the objection is that you'll have to clean your water pipes out for a while afterwards. seems like a fair trade, but it is an in emergency type of system.
Thank you. And then this isn't a question, it's a statement. It just says, awesome idea, thank you. And for the sake of time, I think, Mary Ellen, why don't you take it away and close us out if you're there. Yeah, I see your name.
That was phenomenal. Thank you so much. I have a question, Michael. What does PSPS stand for?
Public safety power shutoffs. Those are the new de-energizations that PG&E is and the other investor-owned utilities, and not even just in California, are engaging in, where because of drought conditions, low humidity, and the desire to avoid really catastrophic wildfires, they're starting to turn off, de-energize the electric grid in times when it might spark a fire. And that's turning an electric grid that we have come to rely on into something that's much less reliable. And again, that happens it's much more likely to happen in rural communities. And the effects of that are pretty considerable on the local economy, just on living there, and on property prices as well.
Thank you. I can just see a rush of rural communities getting on this bandwagon. It's certainly no accident that Lake County, which suffered as much as any county in the state, would be one of the first to embrace this. That they're small, but they're very forward thinking over there, and they paid a high price for lack of fire suppression in the past, over and over again. Anyway, this is the end of a remarkably informative day. We reached our goal. We were the most information-packed symposium in the Western Hemisphere. So congratulations. It was a lofty goal and we reached it. I do want to thank everybody for participating in the panel, to Craig and Carolyn for putting together this amazing symposium, and for all of your participants. We've made a lot of new friends today, and those relationships are going to continue. I have no doubt about it. I've already got about 3 webinars in mind to follow up on the various aspects of expanding capacity to minority communities and homeownership and retribution opportunities. So I will like to thank again our sponsors. You've been wonderful. I'd like to thank our attendees, our behind the scenes folks, Rochelle and Becky and Sherry. It's been terrific. I will remind that most of you are signed up for our symposium tomorrow, the CAL-ALHFA annual meeting. That will start at 9 a.m. and go through noon, just like this. We'll turn it over to Wendy for some final closing remarks. Thank you again, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, and I just wanted to say a quick thank you. It was great to see everybody, even though it was virtual. And as Mary Ellen said, we will be live next year, but want to thank you for your support and attendance this year. And great to see you and meet our new friends, our new panelists, with a lot of information today. I learned quite a bit, and I think it was just a wonderful day. So thank you very much, and hope to see everyone tomorrow.